People think injustice announces itself with sirens and shouting, but that morning it started with silence and a look, the kind of look that tells you someone has already decided who you are. By the time the handcuffs closed around my wrists in the middle of an airport on Christmas Eve, I realized something I wish wasn't true. Knowing the law doesn't protect you when the person holding the power has already made up their mind. Yeah, that happened. And once you hear the whole story, you might start questioning how safe normal really is. That morning felt ordinary in the way only early Christmas Eve mornings do. The airport was quieter than usual, almost peaceful, like it was pretending to be kind for the holidays. Most people were already where they needed to be, home with family, half awake on couches, plates of food balanced on their knees. The ones still moving through the terminal were the leftovers. Flight crews, last-minute travelers, people like me who always arrive early because life taught us rushing leads to mistakes. I had just finished a brutal stretch at work, the kind that drains you without leaving a visible mark, and all I wanted was a cup of bad airport coffee and to sit at my gate, thinking about my dad waiting for me on the other end of the flight. I remember adjusting my coat, rolling my suitcase behind me, feeling tired but light, like the hard part of the year was finally over. I had already gone through security without a single issue. Shoes on bag scanned, polite nods done. That small relief settled in, you know what I mean? That moment where you think, okay, nothing else can go wrong now. I was walking toward my gate, half checking my phone, half thinking about the wrapped gift in my suitcase, when I heard a voice cut through the quiet, sharp and sudden. "Ma'am, stop. Right there." I turned and saw him, Officer Granger. Tall, confident, wearing his authority like armor. The thing that stuck with me wasn't his size or his badge, it was his expression. It wasn't curious or cautious or professional. It was already certain. I smiled politely because that's what you do when you want to get home without trouble. "Is there a problem, officer?" He didn't answer. He asked where I was flying. I told him. He asked why. I said, "Christmas visiting family." He nodded slowly, eyes drifting to my briefcase like it offended him. Then came the question that changed the air around us. "What do you do for work?" That question didn't belong there, and we both knew it. Still, I answered, "I work in the court system." He leaned in slightly. "What kind?" I hesitated for half a second, then said it. "I'm a judge." You'd think that would calm things down, right? Instead, it did the opposite. His jaw tightened. His tone shifted. "Step aside. I'm going to search your bags." That's when my instincts kicked in. I'd watched who he hadn't stopped. White passengers passed freely, laughing, talking on phones, dragging oversized bags without so much as a glance. But me, I was suddenly random. I asked why, calmly, carefully. He said, "Do you want to make this difficult?" And there it was, that familiar fork in the road. You can comply completely and disappear into yourself, or you can hold on to your rights and risk becoming a problem. I chose the path I thought was safest. I told him he could search my suitcase, but I didn't consent to a search of my briefcase. His face hardened. "You're being uncooperative." "I'm being lawful," I said. "That briefcase contains confidential documents." He didn't argue. He performed. He opened my suitcase right there by the gate and began laying my life out in public piece by piece. Clothes, shoes, personal items, things no stranger has a right to display. People slowed down. Phones came out. I could feel the heat of embarrassment crawling up my neck, but I kept my hands clasped, my face neutral. I'd learned long ago that losing control is exactly what some people are waiting for. He dug through my toiletries like he expected my lotion to confess to something. Finally, he pointed at my briefcase again. "Open it." I said no, not without a warrant or a supervisor. He stared at me and said, "You think you're special." And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about security, it was about ego. I took out my phone. I'm recording this interaction. That's when he really snapped. "Put it away, now." I told him I had the right to record in a public space. He stepped closer, invading my space, voice low and threatening. "Put it away, or you're going to regret it." My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. He called for backup like I was dangerous. 2 officers arrived. One of them, Officer Reyes, took one look at the scene, and I saw it in her eyes. The calculation, the concern. The other looked uncertain, caught between loyalty and common sense. Granger told them I was refusing lawful orders. I told them the truth. I said I was complying, that my rights were being violated, that I believed I was being profiled. That word made everyone uncomfortable. Reyes suggested calling a supervisor. Granger shut her down. That's when I showed my judicial ID and said who I was. The air changed again. The other officers understood immediately how serious this was. Granger didn't. He doubled down. He said being a judge didn't give me special treatment. His voice got louder, drawing more attention. People were openly watching now. Someone muttered that this was insane. A child asked why they were being mean to me. I kept recording and stated clearly for the camera what was happening, the time, the lack of probable cause. And then he made the worst decision of his career. "You're under arrest for obstructing airport security," he said, reaching for his cuffs. I asked what crime I'd committed. He didn't answer. Not really. The cuffs closed around my wrists, cold and tight, the sound echoing in a way I'll never forget. People gasped. Someone started crying. Phones were no longer discreet. I looked into my camera and said my name, my position, and that I was being arrested without cause. Granger shouted at the crowd to disperse, threatening them too. Reyes looked sick. The other officer looked trapped. And just like that, I was being walked through the terminal in handcuffs while my flight boarded without me. On the way out, I could hear the final boarding call. I thought about my dad checking his watch, pretending not to worry. I thought about the gift in my suitcase. The ride to the station felt unreal. Granger kept looking back at me like he expected something: anger, tears, regret. I gave him nothing. I was already documenting everything in my head because that's how you survive this kind of moment. At the station, they processed me like anyone else. Fingerprints, photo, inventory. The desk sergeant looked twice at my occupation and said nothing. Granger wrote his report, a work of fiction that would later fall apart under video evidence. Sitting in that holding cell was when it finally hit me. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet ache. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how carefully you live, you can still be reduced to a stereotype in someone else's mind. By the time my attorney arrived, videos of my arrest were already spreading online. Someone had captioned it, "Arrested for traveling while black on Christmas Eve." That line traveled faster than the truth ever does. Reporters called. People argued about me like I was an idea instead of a person. My release came hours later after enough pressure traveled up the chain. Cameras flashed as I stepped outside. I gave a brief statement, thanked the witnesses, said I would pursue every legal option. I meant it. The aftermath was loud. Granger was placed on leave. Investigations started. Complaints that had once been ignored suddenly mattered. Officers came forward. Policies were reviewed. My lawsuit wasn't just about him, it was about the system that protected him until it couldn't. The evidence was overwhelming. Videos, witnesses, contradictions. Eventually, there was a settlement big enough to make people online say I was lucky, like money erases humiliation. I used a large part of it to support people who don't have a title on their ID, people who get profiled without cameras or witnesses. I went back to work. I kept my head up. But I still missed Christmas with my dad that year. I still remember the sound of those cuffs. And I still wonder, if I hadn't known the law, if I hadn't recorded, if I hadn't had witnesses, would anyone have cared? Or would I have been another unfounded complaint filed away and forgotten? That's the part that should bother all of us. So I want to hear from you. Was this one bad officer or a system that allowed him to exist? If you'd been there, would you have spoken up, recorded, or looked away? And if you've ever seen or lived something like this, share it in the comments. Conversations like this matter. If this story made you feel anything like it, subscribe and pass it along, because believing it can't happen here is a luxury too many of us don't have.